Thanks for coming. So this demo theater, we've got about a half an hour, so I'll try to go through a few things and show a quick demo, and I'll leave a few minutes for questions at the end. My name is Clint Loveman. I'm the product manager for the app, and just kind of show of hands, who's heard of this new app? Okay, so about half the people in the room. The other half of the people, you are Adobe users, I'm assuming? Yes? No? Yeah? Okay. So let me just go through this quickly, and I'll give a quick demo, and then we can take some questions at the end. So the app is called ArcGIS Maps for Adobe Creative Cloud, and we're still in beta, so we haven't released as of yet. We've been working on it for maybe a little over a year or so. We're not a huge team, so it's taken us a little bit of time. And the basic workflow that we're trying to support is taking content that's inside of ArcGIS and bringing that into Adobe. And we know that over the last few years, desktop users, anyone desktop? And I'm assuming if you guys are desktop and you've used Adobe, you've come across some issues, some limitations of when you export out an Adobe Illustrator file out of ArcMap. You get a lot of clipping paths, you get page items, spline text doesn't work, there's a few other things like that. So this is a step in that direction where what we're trying to do is across the platform have a better interoperability story with Esri technology and Adobe in particular. But again, that's kind of the long-term vision. Specifically right now, what we're looking at is integrating content from ArcGIS Online and bringing that specifically into Adobe Illustrator and Photoshop. So the idea is that you've published some content, you've got some spatial content that's living up in ArcGIS, published by the ArcGIS community, data that you can then consume into Illustrator. If you're consuming it into Illustrator, if you're familiar with Illustrator, it's primarily a vector editing application. So the content that we'll give you is vectors, if assuming that the content that's been published is also vectors. If you're consuming that content inside of Photoshop, because Photoshop is primarily a raster editing application, it will consume that as raster or image content. So the general idea with this tool, this application, is to make the workflows of sharing geographic content with the graphics community a little bit easier. And when we talk about that, that could be maybe within a large organization, maybe there's a GIS team, and that GIS team has to share geographic information with a marketing team or a graphic designs team or a PR type organization. And a lot of times GIS professionals and graphic designers and marketing people don't use the same technology, don't understand the same speak, if you would. And so what we're trying to do that. So you could be a large organization, or you could be a one person, right? You could be the GIS analyst first part of the day doing some sort of buffers and spatial analysis, and then you want to bring that into Illustrator. You might be that same person who wants to share that geographic content. So we're hoping that these tools over time will help facilitate those types of workflows. So this is kind of conceptually how we think about the world a little bit. Is on the far left there we've got ArcGIS, and that's where all the powerful spatial analytics happens, obviously, and we've got a lot of great cartography tools over there. And then kind of on the far right we've got Adobe, and obviously that's what their kind of thing is, design and presentation quality graphics. And then you've got someone who kind of sits in the middle, and those are cartographers, and they'll spend some percentage of their day in ArcGIS doing analysis and creating data and doing such types of workflows. And then on the other end, they'll also probably kick out some maps and some products out of ArcGIS and bring them into Illustrator or Photoshop. And so really what we're trying to do is kind of bridge those gaps. So allow the analyst to more easily share geographic content and spatial information with the Adobe users, and allow the designers to also more easily consume. So where we actually are probably in terms of development and what we're working on is we're probably somewhere between the cartographer and the designer. We're somewhere in there in terms of the type of feature functionality that we're offering. But in terms of what we want to do is help kind of everyone along this workflow, but that's kind of the longer term roadmap. So instead of just kind of talking through what the application does, I figured I'd jump in and show you a demonstration. I'll go through, show you how to consume content that's been published into ArcGIS Online, look at your organization and figure out how to share that content with Illustrator and Photoshop. I'll show you how you can actually bring in shape files as well, how to compile a map, and then some of the other workflows of processes. So let me jump in and give you a quick demonstration here. So this is, you guys can't see my Illustrator. Hold on a second here. Let me, there we go. Okay, had to kill PowerPoint. So this is Adobe Illustrator, and again, we're not released yet. We're still in beta. Anyone here in the beta program? Cool. We got one person. Okay, great. Once you install it, and it'll look the same way once it's installed for final as well. We show up under Windows, under Extensions, and if you go here, you'll see ArcGIS Maps for Adobe Creative Cloud. So you simply click on this. To access and enable the application, you have to be a named user inside of an ArcGIS Online organization. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to sign in to my organization. One more time. Too many passwords, too many logins. There we go. So once the application is enabled, you get a couple of additional dialogues. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to create a map, and it's prompting us here to define an area. What I can do is if I do a prolonged click, so if I click and hold, you get a couple of options. I can define what we call a map board or a map extent, just interactively, but what I can also do is what I'm going to do in this demonstration. I'm just going to bring in a web map directly. So what I'm going to do is say create from web map, and the first thing it's going to prompt me is where's the location of that web map. So if I click here, I'll get my organization, and within my organization I'll see a series of nodes that I can navigate through. So for example, if I come out here, I've created a group called Dev Summit, and I've got a node in here called Locations. And then inside of that, I have a series of web maps. Now, before I actually bring this in, what I want to do is kind of show you how you set that up on the back end inside of the ArcGIS Online organization. So this is the same organization here that I've logged into, and I'm here in the Groups tab of my organization. I'm going to open up all the groups that are in this organization. You can see there's a number of groups that we've created here. Now the one that I actually loaded from was called Locations, and you can see this one here. So let me just toggle back really quickly, and you can see that it's under my organization, and I've got something called Dev Summit, and then I have Locations, and then I have a series of maps within that group. How that's organized here is all we see are groups. So that higher level category of Dev Summit, if I click in here and open up that group, what I want you to notice is the tagging structure over here. So to essentially register a series of content or a group with this application, you give it a specific tag, and that specific tag has an M4CC. So that stands for Maps for Creative Cloud. So for example, let me just go in here real quick and scroll down. You can see a little bit easier here. You can see the tagging structure. Now this pipe, that delimits, for example, what the application sees as a folder. So in this case, I can have Dev Summit. I can change that to be whatever I want. I can have any number of pipes, and that will again delimit a folder structure in this tree view. So again, if I go back in here, it's kind of the reverse. You can see Dev Summit, which is that first pipe, and then you can see the name of the locations. And then any map that is shared with that group will now become registered with the application. So the idea being is you're sharing, these maps have been designed to be shared with Adobe Illustrator or Photoshop. So not necessarily every map that's in your organization is probably wants to be consumed inside of this group or inside of this organization. So this is a way of filtering content essentially that's accessible to this application. So that's kind of how that works there. So again, and you're not, I just want to make sure that it's not the actual items, the web maps or the layers that you're tagging, it's the group. So you tag the group, and then you can just share individual items or layers to that group, and then those become recognizable within the application. So I just wanted to show that real quick. So let me now go back. So that's how we register items with the application. So now what I want to do is I can find the specific maps that have been shared with me for this application. I'm going to bring in this market opportunities within the United States. So I'm going to load that in. And what that does is it sets the same geographic extent that was defined in the web map. Now I can make modifications to that. I can take these handles and I can kind of shrink them in here a little bit. And what you'll notice up here, this is the output dimensions or the document size. And for example, this is set to PT, which is points. It's keying off of my units, my preferences that are in Illustrator. So for example, if I want this to be, if I want this to be 900, I can actually type in 900 and I can type in 700 points. I could also type in inches or points or whatever I want it to be, and that will define the dimensions. I can also change the scale here, for example. I can type in any scale I want, but I also have some default scales that I can pick from. So this first dialog here, this is not the map. This is just an extent of what the map will represent. If you actually want to see the content, you click on this little button here, or the same one here, and it opens up a second window. And this second window is called our compilation window. And what this is kind of like a what you see is what you get type of experience. So you can view the map and the content before you bring it inside of Illustrator. So in this particular example, you can see it's got a base map. You can see the block groups here that have been symbolized by brown being the supply exceeds demand, green being demand exceeds supply in terms of the symbology. I can actually remove some of the layers if I don't want to bring those in. What I can also do is add additional layers. So I can come up here, I can do a prolonged click, I can add additional layers, I can switch out my web maps, and I can also load in shapefiles. So in this example here, I'm going to bring in a shapefile. This is some points of interest over New York City. I'm going to bring those in. And let me just turn this off here. You'll see them a little bit better. So the green dots here are the shapefiles that I just brought into this map. So what I also want to do is, you'll notice the name. I'm going to change the name of this layer. And what I want to do is I want to consume and auto-apply some symbols that have already been set up in Illustrator for me. So let me open up my layers panel here. And as part of the application, we're also providing a series of symbols, brushes, and strokes that get installed with Illustrator as well. So for example, if I go in here and, symbols, I'm going to go into ArcGIS Maps, and I'm going to bring in some standard symbols here. I'm going to bring those over, and I'm going to dock those over here. So you can see we have a series of map type symbols here in Illustrator format. So what I'm going to do, before I bring this map in, I want to replace the symbols that were being used in ArcGIS Online for symbols that have been specifically designed inside of Illustrator. So I'm going to go back in here, and what I'm simply going to do is rename this layer here, and I'm going to make it basic pin red. So that maps to this symbol over here, basic pin red. So essentially any symbol that has that name will now get replaced with this when I bring this map in. So once I'm ready, what I simply do is click the download button, and when I click that, what's happening is it's taking this web map and it's converting it to an Adobe Illustrator file. And when it does that, it's going to bring it back into Illustrator and maintain the layer structure that was defined and add that symbol to the document here. So we'll give it a couple seconds here. It's downloading. So you can now see it behind the page here in Illustrator Drawing. So Illustrator's saving the file now. So you can see the document here. You'll notice that if I go to the layers panel here, you'll notice that layer had all the red symbols that now got replaced. You'll notice that these are all vectors. And what I can do here is obviously make changes, right? So everything is an editable vector graphic. So I can go through and, for example, let me just make a quick couple modifications here. I can go through and highlight some areas here. Obviously, we're not editing the GIS data here, we're just editing the graphics file. So what I want to do is make a couple modifications here for this particular map that I'm making. It's going to go in and kind of edit out some of the areas that I don't want. I want to make a map that kind of highlights the real estate market in Manhattan, and only Manhattan. So what I want to do is get rid of some of the other content in here. So the other thing I can do is, let me just get rid of this for a second. And I'm going to use some of the common Illustrator tools and technologies for, I'm going to add an opacity, and I'm going to multiply and give it a value of 75%, something to that effect. So I've kind of get the aesthetic that I'm looking for here. So when I turn these back on, again, I get the map that I'm kind of looking to have here, and it gives me the aesthetic that I want. Then the last thing, for example, again, just using the Illustrator technology, I can place in a title, for example. And I can position that. So again, the key being this is all vector artwork, and I can go in, use my source content that's published in ArcGIS Online, bring that in, and as an Illustrator user, I can use the tools that I'm familiar with, and I've got this really clean structure. You'll notice again, there are no clipping paths. All the layers are named appropriately, so it's easy to find content and make modifications to that. So let me jump back to the presentation. So a couple other things just wanted to highlight real quickly. So when you're in defining a map board, a couple things is when I gave the demonstration, I picked a web map option. And again, what you saw me do is I went in and I actually changed the dimensions of that. Obviously, when you're making a map, there's a couple of factors. There's the geographic extent, there's the scale of the map, and then there's the actual page size. So we'll actually keep those factors synced up. So we'll give you a preview of what you're doing in determining if you define a page size and you define a scale, we'll calculate the other factor for you. So to make that workflow a little bit easier. Again, you saw me, you can either define the extent based on the web map, or you can interactively define the extent. The other thing I didn't show you is the ability to toggle in and out of edit mode. So you can modify that extent, or you can navigate the map. You can have more than one map board in a document. The key thing with the map board dialog is it's not a preview of the map. So the idea of this first part of the workflow is define an extent, define the scale, and then add content into the compilation window. And again, the compilation window is a preview of the map. So that's where you're going to actually see what the map is going to look like. You're going to see your layers and all that content. So inside of the compilation window, that's where you browse for other geographic content. That's where you can bring in content from ArcGIS Online, the Living Atlas. You can pull in content from your own organization. And again, I talked about the tagging, so that's important. If you want to bring in content from your organization, it has to be inside of a group that has that tag. The other thing you need to do is if you're bringing in content that's supposed to be for Illustrator for vector access, when you publish a web map, make sure that you have query enabled on that service. The query is what enables us to actually consume vectors inside of this application. So if you're intending to share this map with someone in Illustrator and you want them to make modifications in Illustrator, make sure that the service has query enabled. That will give us access to the vectors. You can also add shape files, which I showed you. You can actually, instead of browsing, you can add in a URL. So if there's a specific item or a specific layer or map that you want, you can actually share the URL and paste that in there and then download that. A couple things I didn't show because we just didn't really have time. You can actually manage the base map. So the base map is a layer, you can turn it on or turn it off. The base map will actually come in as raster because it's a raster base map. So even inside of Illustrator, you can get the base map, but that will show up as a cached image. The other thing we can do now support, we added this at beta 2 or after beta 2, is we have the ability to project as well. So we can make projections before you download the map as well. There's a couple other things. So again, you define an extent in the map board. You then add in content into the compilation, and then you synchronize the map. So then you download it. So that's where you take the web map and you add that as layers inside of your Adobe Illustrator document or your Photoshop document. The other thing you can do is you can do multiple downloads. You can do multiple syncs. So I can go back to that same web map that I just downloaded and say, oh, I wanted to add roads as well. I can go back, find roads, and bring those in, synchronize again, and it'll add another layer to the document. Once your map is downloaded, the very first time, the map board becomes locked. So what that means is once you download and you kind of commit to the page size, the scale, and the extent, you can't make changes to that. You can add content, but you can't change the projection, the scale of the map, or the extent of the map. We lock you into that once you download into Illustrator. And that allows us to keep the georeferencing up to date, obviously. You have what we call processes, and I showed you a couple of those. The one I highlighted in the demonstration was the ability to replace an ArcGIS symbol with an Adobe Illustrator symbol. So there's a series of different processes that you can run automatically when you download a map. So that's kind of some of the other workflows that you could support. I didn't show Photoshop, but it also works in Photoshop. And it's just like Illustrator, same workflow. Define a map board, add in content, and then download that content. A couple differences. Again, one I mentioned, Photoshop is a raster editing application. So what you consume into Photoshop, it's not going to be vectors, it's going to be raster. So the main use case for Photoshop is if you've published image services. So if you've published image services, like some really great imagery here, or if you're using, for example, Esri's hill-shaded image service, you can consume that directly into Photoshop as well. Again, same thing. Every time you sync, it brings in a number of layers. So if you sync multiple times, a new layer gets added to Photoshop as an individual layer as well. In Photoshop, there are no processes. So there's no ability to change symbols or change the rendering directly before it downloads. That would be a Photoshop-specific workflow after the fact. So just real quickly, again, we're still in beta. The idea is once we release, and we're targeting probably 10.5.1, so in a couple months we're probably going to go live. The idea is if you've ever gone to Adobe's add-ons page, there's a series of add-ons or extensions to Illustrator, Photoshop, and some of the other Creative Cloud applications. That's where this is going to live. So it's going to live on the Adobe side. So that's where you download it from there. For more information on the product, you can go to the product page. The doc will be, right now that's an internal link, so you can't hit that. I didn't realize that, but the documentation will be external and it'll be web doc. There's a series of known limits, and again, that'll get refined before we release as well. There is a YouTube channel, and so we've got a couple videos up there right now. They highlight some of the beta workflows and technology. That'll change as we go to release, but if you want to see a little more detail, you can go to the YouTube channel. There's, I think, 3 videos up there, and we're going to be posting some more at or after release. And again, if you're interested in beta, there's still time to participate and give us feedback. You can sign up there. You can also, that's a pretty ugly URL. An easier way to do it is actually just go to the product page, which is just esri.com/AdobeCC. And at the bottom of the product page, if you scroll down, there'll be a link to actually hook up for the beta. So if you want to do that, we'd encourage that and we'd appreciate it. And just really quickly, a few FAQs, usually things people ask. When it's going to be available, I said we're still in beta. We're in beta 2 right now. We're anticipating in the next couple of months we'll do a first release. So look for that again, maybe May timeframe, May or April timeframe. How much does it cost? So the application itself is no cost for the application, but you do have to be a member of an organization. You have to have a named user, a level 2 user inside of an ArcGIS Online organization. So that's really what the cost is. It's the cost for a named user, a level 2 user. Does it work on Mac and or PC? This is a PC. It also does work on Mac. I have a Mac is what I usually use, but I was just demonstrating today with the PC, so it works on both. What versions of Creative Cloud are supported? That's still to be determined. Right now we go back to, I think, version 17. We're going to make a decision at final what versions we will support. There are a couple of issues that Adobe has been working with us on where some of the older versions might not work. So they're trying to figure out how far back they can support some of the things that we need. So what specific releases of Adobe Creative Cloud are still to be determined. So I'll update that information once it becomes available. How will it install? I showed you that. The idea is you'll go to the Adobe add-ons page and you can just download it from there and it'll install directly on your desktop. And is it supported in Portal? No. For the first release, there's no Portal support. It's purely an ArcGIS Online implementation. The idea is after we release in the next couple of months, we'll add in support for Portal in a future release, probably like a 1.1 or a 1.2, something like that for Portal, for an on-premise implementation. That is all I have. I have 4 minutes left. If you guys have the event app, you can tell me what you think, sign up, provide some feedback on this demo theater, and let me know. And I've got 3 minutes for questions, so it's pretty good. Any questions? I know that was kind of quick. No questions. I answered everything you ever wanted to know. That is great. I think I'm supposed to run down here with this. How does it deal with text? Yeah, so the question was, how does it deal with text? So if you publish your map with labels, we'll consume those labels. So in the example that I had, I didn't happen to have maps, but yeah, if your maps have labels, those will come in as editable text strings. Okay. Cool? Any other questions? I'm supposed to stay away from these things before feedback. Hi, you can just speak into this thing.
Hello. So what about going back from Illustrator to code? Like, is there a way to copy and paste the attribute changes? No.
No. Yeah, so the question is, once you bring in an Illustrator, can you push it back to ArcGIS Online? No, there's no way. So it's a one-way street at this point. Yeah. Any other questions? No? All right, cool. Thanks, everybody.